Hi, it's Wyndham. How many of you know the Stoic philosopher Seneca and his very famous quote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality"? How many of you have heard that? And how many of you can hold your hands up and go, yeah, that is absolutely true? The reason I introduce it to you is one, this is an ancient Roman philosopher, he lived from 4 BC to 65 AD. Right, that's nearly 2,000 years ago. The mid part of his life would have been 2,000 years ago. And this idea, super relevant today. So if you haven't heard it before, I'm going to give you an example of exactly what this Stoic philosopher's perfect encapsulation of a human trait looks like. Let me wind back just over a week. So last Friday, 2 Fridays ago, I got an email late in the day from a lady at a potential client. I'd had no contact with her previously, a little bit of contact with some of her colleagues, but had never worked for the organisation, in the organisation, nothing like that at all. And I get an email from her saying, I really hope you can help. I've got a workshop with my team next week on Wednesday. And the person who was going to run it and come in and host it for us has dropped out. I've heard great things about you. Would you be able to help? So I go back on my email and I say, the short answer is absolutely. She'd given me a little bit of detail about what they wanted to cover, very high level, but enough for me to say, yes, I can help. And then I asked for a bit of time with her to talk it through a little bit more so I can develop something that actually meets their needs. I then heard back from her on the Monday. We had a relatively brief conversation. Both came away. I set the agenda, had it verified by her and her boss. All good. Everybody's happy. Wednesday morning, first thing comes along. I spend 2 hours with this really fantastic team of people. And the premise of this whole thing was, how can we get to know each other better? And how can we learn to be better listeners? Really difficult, right? The work environment is super pressured. There is no time. Is one of the fundamental challenges we face at work, is everything is so fast paced. And actually not just at work. Our lives are so busy and everybody is charging around at 100 miles an hour that genuinely, deliberately listening becomes a learned skill. Anyway, so we have this 2-hour session. Goes well as far as I'm concerned. There were some slight overruns, so we didn't manage to get to everything that we had put on the agenda. Session was drawn to a close. I go about my day. I write a quick email to the lady who had employed me, thanking her and the team for their commitment, how open they were, all those kind of things, and then ask for any feedback. This was on the Wednesday afternoon. And then I didn't hear anything. Didn't hear anything Wednesday afternoon, team day. I was not expecting that. Didn't hear anything on the Thursday. Didn't hear anything on the Friday. And then I'm into the weekend. A friend of mine came to stay for the weekend. And we were out wandering around in the woods, talking all things personal development, personal growth. And I was telling him this story, and I couldn't help my brain offering me reasons why I hadn't had any feedback. And none of those reasons had anything to do with the woman who had employed me. They were all to do with me. My mind was telling me, well, you're not getting feedback because they didn't like it. You're not getting feedback because this particular person doesn't know how to tell you they thought it was a bit crap. You're not getting feedback because they didn't think they got value for money. You're not getting feedback because all about me. And I have done a lot of work on myself. So I know my mind is filling in the gaps. I know that. And I know that I cannot know anything about this person's life. I don't know what their priorities are. Expecting them to offer me feedback because my ego demands it in my timescale, I know, intellectually, I know I have no control over that. But I spent the whole weekend dipping back in to this idea, telling myself, coaching myself that I couldn't know what the priorities were. And did I believe I had brought value? And was it of value to the team? I do. I did believe that. I do still believe that. Anyway, so I spent the weekend suffering in my imagination. This morning, I've got an email from the client apologising for not coming back to me sooner and basically giving me a whole load of positive feedback from her boss and the team. Basically, it was a huge success. So I have spent the best part of 4 days coaching myself out of the stories my mind has been giving me. And sometimes I was going, I could talk myself into it. And I was chatting to this friend and he would just look at me going, I'm hearing the words, but I'm not feeling they're landing in your heart. And this is the reality of the work we have to do to grow, or rather the work we have to do if we want to grow as human beings. There's this moment where we can intellectualize it. We can recognize that I have no control over this other person's priorities. Offering me feedback, I know that the company she works for is fast-paced, it is very successful, it is a fail-fast organisation, which means you have to start quickly, run fast, fail fast, iterate. I can only imagine how much more there was above me in her priorities list. I know that to be true. And yet there was still this part of me, if we drop down from the head into the body and try to embody that knowledge, I was still processing it. I was still working with it. There was an element of my blueprint that was resisting the truth that I can't control her timings. And the fact that she hadn't responded in the time that my ego wanted her to respond didn't mean it was all terrible. Didn't mean that they got no value. Didn't mean any of those things. And so I was in this conflicting headspace and body space. And my blueprint automates our reactions to input stimulus was reacting off old beliefs. Because when I was younger, of course, like most people, there's this belief of a lack in us when we don't get positive feedback, when we don't get that external validation. That can be enormously challenging. That is one of the ways most of us gauge where we are, who we are, how successful we are. Now, I know that not to be helpful, and yet there's this belief within my blueprint that is resisting that. And my task as someone who is committed to growing as much as I can, to find out as much as I can about myself, the world, and all the opportunities that it presents to me if I'm open to them, my task is to seek this belief out. This belief that says, if I'm not being validated, I'm not worthy. And once I've found it, I pressure test it. I apply as much pressure as I possibly can to it until I see the fault lines, until it starts to crumble. Because my value is not dependent on somebody offering me validation. My value is innate. And yet, our blueprints behave in such a way to trick us into believing that isn't so. So when this was happening, it was because I was aware of it and I had somebody to talk to, it was an interesting moment for me every time it came up over the weekend, because I knew what was happening. I knew my blueprint was triggering a reaction. And I knew that there was a truth within my blueprint that was rubbing up against the truth my mind was giving me, or that I understood to be true, that I couldn't have any control, that a lack of response doesn't mean anything. And so I sat with it. And then here today, I have proof that none of that was real. So when did you last suffer more in imagination than in reality? From my experience, it happens all the time. Because we as human beings don't like uncertainty, and we don't like stories with big gaps in them. So the story I was dealing with was, I've asked for feedback, I haven't got any. Well, I'll populate the feedback. And because I'm centering myself, and because there's been a delay, or this person has a million other things they need to do first, I'll make it all about me, and I'll make it all about a lack in me. Look at your own lives. Think of when you fill in the blanks. How often do you fill them in a positive way that reflects really well on you? And how often do you fill them in a negative way that reflects poorly on you? And how many times do we get the resolution that disproves it all? And that actually in reflection we could have gone, well, I could have saved myself 4 days of mental torture and mental suffering by accepting, I don't know, they'll get back to me when they can, or they won't get back to me at all. Fine. I cannot do anything about that. So the 6 essential elements come into play again. Compassion for myself. It's not about me. It's fine. Do I think I did a good job? Yeah, I think I did a good job. Do I think they gained value? Yes, I do think they gain value. Cool, compassion. Curiosity. The second bit of that, let's explore it. Did it go well? Do I think it was value? Connection. Was I true to myself in all of that? Yeah, I was. Awareness. What's actually happening? Well, I have no idea what is on this woman's to-do list. I don't know how quickly she can come back. I don't even know if she is somebody who offers feedback. All I am aware of is I've delivered a workshop, I think it's of value, and I haven't had any feedback. That's all I know. And if that continues to be all I know, can I accept that? Yeah. Okay, intentional action. Move on. Now that was the one that I struggled with. The intentional action to put it to bed, to move on. So it came up 4 or 5 times over the weekend. But when we leverage these 6 essential elements, it offers us this framework in which we can assess the situation we're in. I leave you with that. I wish you a peaceful and joyful few days, and I will speak to you soon.